Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Portland, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar tonight. I am Audrey Zunkel-DeCourcy, Vice President of the League of Women Voters. We are excited to bring this program to you on Portland's new city government. This webinar will highlight what we need to know about the changing roles and responsibilities in our new form of government so that we can be informed voters when we elect leaders for these new positions. The League is dedicated to making democracy work. One of our core beliefs is that democracy functions best when voters are informed about issues and engaged in their communities. And for these reasons, we present programs like this one. This is the second in our series of community education panels about the 2024 election, helping Portlanders be informed voters and excited about our city's future. Last month, our panel talked about ranked choice voting, and next month, we will offer reflections and analysis of the election. You can learn about our other programs and find our impartial election information on our website, lwvpdx.org. Our website features our Election 2024 hub with detailed information you need to be an informed voter. As ballots arrive in your mailboxes next week, we have detailed information on candidates and ballot measures, including video and podcast interviews with candidates. On Vote 411, the League's online election resource, you can plug in your own address in Portland or anywhere across the country and see details about every race on your ballot. We are here to help you make sense of what you're voting on, from our web resources to this program tonight. Now, after tonight, please tell your friends, colleagues, and family to watch this video or listen to the podcast of this program. Links to the recordings will be posted on our website, lwvpdx.org, next week. Our moderator tonight is Wynne Firth, the chair of our Know Your New Government Committee. She will introduce each panelist as the evening progresses.
So good to be here with all of you. Over 300 of you signed up. With the election just weeks away and our new government coming into being on January 1st, we're glad to be sharing this information about what we can expect. We hope to help you not just be an informed voter this fall, but an engaged community member for years to come. Please remember that audience questions can be posted in the chat at any time, and they'll be answered as time allows at the end of the program. Tonight, you're going to hear from 4 people who've each worked in important ways on Portland's transition to a new form of government. Michael Jordan, Destiny Magana-Pablo, Jenny Lee, and Melody Ellis-Valdini. They bring a wealth of professional and experiential knowledge to tonight's discussion, and I am so looking forward to hearing from them. So let me introduce our first panelist, Michael Jordan. Mike is the city official charged with leading Portland's transition to its new form of government. Michael Jordan has devoted his life to public service in the Willamette Valley. Before he came to work for the city of Portland, Mike was the city administrator of Canby, a county commissioner in Clackamas County, the chief operating officer of our regional government metro, and the chief operating officer for the state of Oregon's executive branch. About well-rounded experience. He's a graduate of Portland State and holds a certificate of sustainability leadership from the University of Oregon. He first served the city of Portland as the environmental services director, and then starting in 2022 as its chief administrative officer, overseeing the city's central services and citywide initiatives. And more recently, Mayor Ted Wheeler appointed Michael Jordan interim city administrator, with the responsibility of supervising 24 city bureaus and offices as of this past July 1st. So Michael Jordan isn't just leading the transition, he is embodying it in important ways. We're so fortunate to have him here tonight to tell us just what this big operational change in the city government is. Michael, unmute yourself and talk.
Thank you, Wynne. I really appreciate it. That was a very nice introduction, although it makes me feel a little older than maybe I even really am. Hard to believe. Thanks, everybody, for signing up for this and being here tonight. It's really important. This will be one of the most important elections in Portland's history, and I really appreciate you all trying to get yourself up to speed for what is really a historic moment in the city. My job, as Wynn noted, is really to kind of be the ramrod, if you will, to get the city organization ready for this transition. And we started even before the election in 2022 to get ready for this and be prepared because there were just a huge number of things that had to be done. Many of them had to be done, absolutely must be done on time. So we had to form districts we'd never had before. We needed to change our election code very early on. Most people think, well, gee, you had 2 years to do this. It can't be that tough. We had to actually change our election code by the spring of 2023 so that we could get that to Multnomah County so that they could do all of the work to change their software and prepare for ranked choice voting and be able to administer election that's coming up next month. And so the lead time was kind of long on many of the aspects, and we absolutely had to get them done on time to make sure we were ready to run a successful election in 2022. And so I think most everybody has probably heard by now, we've moved from 5 elected officials that acted both as the legislative branch, if you will, of our city government, but also in the commission form acted as the executive and the administrative components of our city government. And we're transitioning to a very different form, one that has 12 elected legislators, 3 from each of 4 districts. Only the mayor now will be elected citywide. The auditor will also be elected citywide. But now we'll have this division of labor, if you will, in city government that is a much more formal division than it has ever been before. And that is 12 representatives from 4 districts that will be the legislative branch. Their job will be to make laws, adopt policy, and of course, they have the power of the purse strings. They will ultimately adopt the city's budget each year. And the mayor will act as the elected executive to be accountable for the day-to-day operations of city government. So we've been doing a lot of things to get ready to onboard we're calling them the freshman class of legislators and a new mayor on, and we're going to be doing probably the most intense onboarding that's ever been done at the city in December of this year. That, of course, will go on for months, if not a number of years, as we get everybody acclimated to this new way of doing business. Now, the one thing that wasn't in the charter language that we have been spending a lot of time working on, and that is reorganizing city government. And that was not mandated in the charter language to do. However, the new mayor, in their role as executive, is required by charter to appoint a city administrator, a professional city administrator. That person will actually have the day-to-day operating authority and responsibility, being responsible both to the mayor directly and also to the city council, both of which can remove the administrator unilaterally. The mayor has hire and fire authority over the administrator. The council also can remove the administrator with a 9-vote supermajority. So that person will be accountable both to the mayor directly every day, but also accountable to the legislative branch to be able to make sure they can do their job and pass laws and policies, deliberate on budgets and all of the issues that go on in the city. It presents a cultural shift in city government that, quite frankly, will take years to fully realize. It's one thing to draw new boxes and lines on an org chart. It's quite another thing to change 7,000 people's behavior in a big organization as multifaceted as the city of Portland is. And so we believed that we needed to reorganize, first of all, to have a single point of accountability in the city administrator feel like they could actually manage the 24 offices and bureaus in city government and be comfortable being held accountable for that entire organization by the council and the mayor, and ultimately, obviously, the residents of Portland. We've never had a point of accountability before in city government. As I mentioned before, we had 5 elected officials. The mayor would assign bureaus to those 5 elected officials, but they were not accountable to the mayor, and they were not accountable to each other. They were only accountable to voters once every 4 years. And so on a day-to-day basis, there wasn't that kind of urgency of having accountability in real time every day for the way the organization responds and operates. And I think that's a huge shift. And whoever the person is in this first role as city administrator is going to be charged with infusing that level of urgency and accountability into our city government to be more responsive to the challenges that we face every day as a big city. And that's another thing that I think is important about this. Portland, for a lot of its history, had been kind of Stumptown, the wide spot in the road between Seattle and San Francisco. And we're not that anymore. We're a big city. We have big city challenges. And most of the challenges we face require multifaceted solutions. There is no one bureau that can solve most of the big problems that Portland faces today. It will take much more collaboration between our bureaus and a much more holistic development of solutions that can address the kinds of challenges we're seeing on our streets today. And one of the advantages, I think, of this newly changed organizational structure is that this single point of accountability and an organization that can be held accountable on a daily basis to be more collaborative across our different bureaus and organizational structures is something we've never had before. I'm fond of telling people we were really good at being vertical, really good at knowing who the boss was and who the boss's boss was and who the commissioner in charge was. And we were very responsive to that vertical nature of our organization. But as I mentioned, if we're going to be good at being a big city and understanding these really challenging issues that we face, we're going to have to be a lot better at being horizontal, a lot better at collaboration across those departmental silos, breaking those things down. And I'm hopeful that this organizational structure that we've developed, and oh, by the way, let me say, it's not rocket science. We reached out to the International City Managers Association in Washington, D.C. We've worked with the National League of Cities very closely over the last 2 years, and they've been incredibly generous at giving us examples of other cities that have gone through big changes in their charters that run in a way that we will hope to run in the future. And we've been really good at being able to get Zoom has been a great friend to us. We've had panels of people from across the country over the last 2 years giving us their thoughts of what does it mean to be a city administrator accountable for everything in a city? What does it mean to be a deputy city administrator? And I'll talk a little bit about that structure in just a moment. So we've had a lot of great help from others who've gone through this and others who can provide their experience and expertise to us. What we did regarding the organizational structure and engaged with really all the leadership, both the chiefs of staff of all the elected officials and the directors of all the bureaus over the last, well, actually through 2023, and I'll get to that in just a moment, is take all of those ideas we've heard from other places, develop the best thing we could at the time we thought for the city of Portland. And what we came up with was a fairly standard organizational structure that you'll see in a lot of cities across the country. And that is groups of bureaus that are aligned around certain functions in the city. So we have a service area for public works, which includes water and the Bureau of Environmental Services and Transportation. We have a Bureau of Public Safety, which includes fire and police. emergency communications and emergency management. We've got an economic and community development service area, which has permitting and Prosper Portland, and also the Housing Bureau and the Planning and Sustainability Bureau. So, and then we have a City Operations Bureau, which has most of the internal services like HR, IT, fleet and facilities, etc. So we have a fairly typical structure that you would see in a lot of other cities. Not that cities are exactly the same, they're not. But we developed that to try and give this first city administrator a shot at being able to both manage a big organization with a structure that can do that, and then also a feeling that they can be held accountable. The other thing to think about that we're going through right now is budgeting in a very different way. And so that framework that I just tried to describe a bit about these service areas that report to deputy city administrators that then report directly to the city administrator. That structure we took to the current city council back in November of 23, about a year ago, and we asked them to consider it and ultimately approve it, which they did. They made one kind of significant change, and that is that they added one more service area called Vibrant Communities, and it holds parks and the Parks Bureau, the Children's Levy, and the arts function. So that's a sixth service area, if you will. We asked them to do that last November because we had to budget into that new structure for the fiscal year we're currently in, starting July 1 of 24 and ending June 30 of 25. The significance of that is that we have to hand this budget to the brand new mayor and new city council right in the middle of the budget year on January 1st of 2025. So we really wanted the opportunity to budget into this new structure so that we could hand it over to the new city council and the new mayor, who were going to get it in the middle of a budget year, but it would be ready to be functioning in that new structure with a budget that's aligned to the new structure. So that's why we had to adopt the structure last November to be ready to do that this year. And then kind of the final big thing we're doing to prepare, if you will, for January of 2025 is that Mayor Wheeler, with his current authority under the current charter to assign bureaus, took that authority and assigned all the bureaus to himself back on July 1st of this year, and then delegated his commissioner in charge authority over all the bureaus to me to do what I like to say is begin to practice how this thing will run on January 1st of next year. We all, I think, believed, including the current commissioners, believed that it would be impractical for us to run the city the old way to December 31st, flip a switch and hand the keys to the new mayor and expect it to run the way it's expected to run in the future. And so it was really important, I think, to all of us that we had kind of a 6-month shakedown cruise, if you will, to be able to work out the kinks, get an understanding of what it meant to have a single point of authority. How are we going to do business differently? And we are now adjusting the budget process again so that we can be ready for what we think will be the demands of a single executive who will propose a budget to the legislative branch, and a legislative branch who will need to deliberate on that budget and ultimately adopt it next June. I've been a budget officer for a number of places, more than I want to remember, as Wynn noted. And I never wanted my budget to be dead on arrival when it arrived in front of the deliberative body. And so we're trying to develop a new structure for the budget that will begin to engage the council much earlier than the other commissioners had engaged in the past, so that they can be a part of the budget construction process, if you will, and really understand all the challenging trade-offs that we're going to face, so that when the mayor does give them the formal budget proposal in May of this coming year in 2025, they will have a relatively short time to deliberate on that budget. So we want to engage them much earlier. So we're revamping the entire budget process also to try and make sure the elected executive is engaging with the elected legislative branch early enough that we can have a smooth budget process. The other thing that we're trying to do in this new process that we quite frankly have done a abysmal, maybe too strong, but not a very good job of in the past, and that is engage the public in the challenging questions that each budget faces. And we are going to face some very challenging budgets for the next few years, and a new freshman class of legislators, a new mayor, and we will begin to work with them on some really challenging trade-offs, whether it's the homeless crisis in our city or it's a public safety structure that is currently burning overtime like crazy because we're understaffed. We've got a problem with our utilities because they are having capital budgets like a new filtration plant for the Water Bureau that's kind of eating up their operational budgets, if you will, and a transportation bureau that quite frankly is being funded with an antiquated funding system. And they are simply, and this is not an overstatement, slowly going out of business unless we change the fundamentals of their revenue structure. So I say all of that to tell you that this new council will face some really big budget challenges going forward, and we need to do a better job engaging them early. And we need to do a better job engaging the public around what will be some really difficult trade-offs in this first year of this new structure. I think I've sucked most of the air out of the room I'm sitting in. So rather than pass out in front of you, I may take a little break there. And I know there will be questions. I'm really happy to answer them and talk maybe more about what you want to talk about when we get to the Q&A portion. So Wynn, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you so much. That was a formidable report on a formidable project and the formidable task facing our new elected officials. Thank you. Our next speaker is Destiny Magaña Pablo. Destiny, born and raised in Portland, lives in District 1, describes herself as a proud member of the Government Transition Advisory Committee, known as GTAC to its friends. It is a group appointed by the City Council with two big jobs. One is offering advice to the city on making the charter reforms happen. And secondly, engaging and educating the community about that topic. She personally has been a leader of the GTAC subcommittee on districts and council operations, which was one of the reasons we especially wanted her today. Destiny has built her career around fostering student success and improving access to health and wellness as part of advancing racial justice. She's done this work with Multnomah County, Portland State, and the Portland Public Schools, and now she works for the Children's Institute. Her academic work at Portland State focuses on social movements within a Portland historical context through the lenses of political science and criminology. So Destiny will talk to us about the work that she and the city are doing and what she's learned talking and listening to Portland residents. So Destiny, if you will unmute yourself, we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you, and thank you for that biography and introduction. Humbling myself again. I am a proud member of the GTAC committee, currently serving until March of 2025, so the new freshman class. I have had the pleasure of hearing Michael Jordan's reports and his transition staff in supporting our efforts of ensuring an efficient and effective transition into the new Portland government, and also engaging and informing the public, and also getting their feedbacks on the things we've been researching about things the city will have to make choices on, such as committee, public engagement, and such. And so again, thank you again for inviting me. I just want to provide a little bit of brief more context on the GTAC committee. It is public facing. We get the most public engagement out of this transition. And we are made out of 15 community members and leaders here. We are supported by transition staff and Multnomah County staff as we're making our presentations. We have public meetings, which we invite you all to attend and to provide public comments. We do provide informational presentations on ranked choice voting and what is charter reform, giving a context of our current form of government and our new form of government and everything in between that is happening there, as well as soliciting feedback in our process. We have done 118 presentations to date, last reported 18 alone in September. And we made it a commitment to have 50% of those be for communities that are traditionally left out of City Hall decision-making, and we are at 41% of our goal. So we are trying hard to get to that goal because we want to be intentional. I will say in September, we did approve as a committee to recommend our final recommendations to the future city leaders. And since we are serving until March of 2025, we are doing strong advocacy. And some of the topics that we researched over 18 months in our final recommendations go into areas such as engaging with the new city council, setting up council in this new form of government, and then specifically, how do we set up council committees in this new form of government, specifically coming together to recommend that they're not aligned to service areas. Like Michael Jordan said, this is a new culture, this is a new form of government, we need to think strategically. And then finally hitting that participating in the budget process. How does the public engage? How do other government bodies like Metro and Multnomah County engage? What about civic leaders and expert matters? Where do they provide their comment and where? And again, we spent 18 months in different subcommittees researching peer cities for many, many weeks, deliberating, getting community feedback during the summer of what we call a summer of engagement, getting, I think, over 400 survey responses, going back to our culturally based organizations we presented at, going back to community-based organizations that have been presented with or hadn't at that time, to get their feedbacks on what works best, what they see is the best way to engage this new city government, their concerns. We also did city transition staff took our recommendations and did internal briefings with city staff that is going through this transition to bring up, areas of concern, areas of improvement, areas of growth. So we really wanted to provide recommendations that not only inspired this new government to work effectively and efficiently and be accountable, but also reflected the staff and the community and guided us to make more informed recommendations. And so that has been published, that has been sent to candidates, it has been sent to endorsing organizations, it has been sent to the communities we presented to and asked feedback from, and we're continuing to create advocacy. And Mike Jordan knows that we have raised these areas of public engagement multiple times, and we will until March of 2025 with this new council. So those are some of the big, a big applause that we had, a moment of absolute pride and just pure fulfillment because we are energized and passionate to do this work. Some of my personal reflections that I wanted to share in this space is coming in, I was completely jaded about government. I think we all are. But what I have been surprised to see is just the wonderful collaboration between city staff and Multnomah County staff. That is the model. I think that is something that needs to continue. One of the biggest things that we have pushed forward is to continue to invest in community engagement while acknowledging we are in a fiscal constraint. That is a priority. That means continuing to invest in voter education. The city of Portland had not invested in voter education, and it did provide some funding. But again, with the responses that we have had while presenting to the public, there is a deep desire to get more of that good practice and to keep being engaged by the city. And ways to do that, in which we have supported as a committee, is through partnerships with your culturally based organizations, with your community-based organizations, really solidifying a approach as a city of what is community engagement, who is accountable, how is communication consistently involved. And one thing that we really wanted the city and the new city council and the new mayor to really prioritize acknowledging there's a fiscal constraint, the very real need to spend time thinking about, with community feedback, district programming. Maybe some districts need offices. There are some districts that have no city appropriate funding to really engage counselors in, let's say, District 1 East Portland. And some districts, from our feedback, did not see the need for offices. So that needs ongoing conversation, acknowledging the fact that we're in a fiscal constraint, and also having city council and mayor and the community available to talk about, what do we need? Council sessions are often inaccessible through physical barriers, hours, things like that. So how do we take this moment to create programming, satellite offices, whatever it may be, to engage people? And all of this to say is that one of the things that I have been really honing in on is that this is a first impression opportunity. As Mike Jordan says, January 1st is happening, but we need to practice this now. And coming from an early learning space, we are trained in a wraparound service mindset, right? If you get a parent coming in needing preschool, they might mention housing insecurity. They might mention food insecurity. We as staff are trained to understand what resources they are. And I think that in our final recommendations, we called it a no wrong door policy. If somebody from the public engages the city culture should be, we are the experts. We know where to go. You will not just get an acknowledgement email saying we've got your complaint or we've got your concern. You'll actually get a response. And that means deep commitment to effective communication and roles and skills. That also means a deep commitment to community engagement, not just through GTAC, but as the standard and the practice. So I shared with this wonderful host today links to share to our website where, again, we have public comments, also transition events outside of just GTAC events. There are policy discussions that we help support with Multnomah County staff. There are other amazing organizations that are doing ranked choice voting that some of them are captured there, some of them are partners. And then again, those final recommendation links that we are working hard to get to so many leaders, officially or unofficially, in this process, because it has taken many people to get to where we are today. And more links to Multnomah County and the city of Portland. And again, I thank you so much for having me here today. And one other thing that we did call out in our final recommendation is setting up Council for Success, is that it was budgeted not enough staff for our city councilors to manage committees. So I do want to call that out today. And again, to continue to invest in voter education and community engagement. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Destiny. I have had a chance to look at the draft recommendations to our future city leaders of the GTAC, and I recommend it to all of you who like to nerd out on city government, who just actually, they have a nice executive summary. And I've actually found myself using some of the analysis that you provided, like the no wrong door policy, when talking to the public on league outings. So there's a lot of great synergy here. Okay, so Michael and Destiny have spoken to us as people with official roles at City Hall. And our next speaker, Jenny Lee, is the Deputy Director of the Coalition of Communities of Color, an organization that knows the city intimately as advocates because of their long history of advocacy with and in the city. The coalition's been an important part of the charter revision process for a number of years. Before she became Deputy Director, Jenny worked as the coalition's Advocacy Director, a position she also held at APANA. She was the Housing Policy Director for Neighborhood Partnership, and before that, or the Partnerships, and before that, the Public Policy Director for the Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice, which sounds interesting. Jenny grew up in Washington County, and she's a graduate of the University of Oregon and Harvard Law School. And we've asked Jenny to talk to us about the experiences that led community organizations to advocate for change, how things seem to be going, and what the future might hold. So Jenny, if you would unmute yourself, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Wynn. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this evening. I'm excited to talk to you all about some of our past experiences and work with advocacy at the city. Again, my name's Jenny Lee. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Coalition of Communities of Color. We're an alliance of culturally specific organizations. So some folks who come up like Apano, Latina Network, Urban League, ERCO, NEA Family Center. So really a lot of the organizations that have become, I think, pillars of cultural and civic life here in Portland. We do state level work, but Portland is where we're based. It's where our member organizations largely are. And really the city touches all of the communities that we seek to serve and represent. So it's been very much an area at the heart of our work for a long time. So we were formed about 2001, actually. So we've gone this trajectory where actually much of our early work as a coalition was around resources, around county budgeting specifically, because so many of our culturally specific organizations provide services and community programming that are housed there, that are provided by them, but funded by the county. So very much these kind of civic processes and how government operates has been at the center of our organizing among our members and as a coalition. And so that applies very much to the city of Portland. So going back about a decade ago, our members came together and realized that really democracy and the health of our democracy was critical to any of the outcomes that we were trying to achieve related to health, well-being, education, and so on for communities of color. So we came together, and some organizations like Unite Oregon, Apano, NAACP worked to develop a report on pathways to a healthier democracy. And that included things like campaign finance reform, small donor elections, but also looking at really what is a functional, effective government that is accountable and representative of communities who have historically been left out of those spaces of power. And so from there, the work continued to grow as we honed in, looking at the challenges we were facing and then starting to apply that to this big opportunity coming up with the Charter Commission. So we worked, myself, my predecessor in the roles, we worked on City Club research reports, recommending changes to the commission form of government, as well as the form of voting. And we, recognized with the anticipation that these big changes would be this kind of conventional wisdom and sense almost of inevitability that the Charter Commission was heavily expected to advance or propose, and at least seek to propose a significant overhaul to the commission form of government. We felt it was really essential that we engage in that space and really come in and think, if not us, then who? And so we built a broad coalition with many partners across civic organizations, culturally specific organizations, labor, business, and beyond. But felt that this was kind of our chance to really reimagine what government could look like, what our electoral systems could look like. And that's an incredibly rare opportunity that folks have. We've spoken to a lot of people around the country about this, and it was, I think, an incredible moment of a commission that really rolled up their sleeves, dug in, and thought deeply about how these systems would impact our communities and then what the opportunities were there. So we really worked throughout that process from, we supported folks, encouraged them to apply for the commission. We worked throughout on civic and community engagement in partnership with the city. And then after that wrapped up, went all in on the ballot measure campaign. So full disclosure on our background. And then currently we are supporting many of the voter education efforts. We're not the leads on that, but we are, doing everything we can to make sure that those are a success. So how did we end up really feeling like what's going on at the city of Portland made this such a priority? The city of Portland, I think, is, again, kind of widespread conventional wisdom, or kind of the nutshell is that commission form of government is far from the most effective or accountable government that we could have. But, and I think there are some shorthand kind of examples you would hear, like permitting. So very exciting. We're on the road, I guess, to permitting reform. So good news, one of the long aspired goals for changing from the commission form of government. We're getting closer. But from our angle and where we came from, knowing about communities that have been often disproportionate, like East Portland and areas where people feel they've had less representation, it was a really significant disconnect. Through our community engagement workshops where we talked about potential policies, it wasn't only, I would say, a disillusionment with government. It wasn't always like a deep cynicism. It was an interest in how people could engage with government and make it better, but then really a sense of not knowing who they could go to or who their elected officials are. Just the idea that you could call the city for anything, period, was new to a lot of folks. So I feel even when we first started thinking about it, we were almost skipping a step and we were saying, well, when people call the city, how are they getting help? And it's actually starts so much earlier and before that, just knowing that people are able to even connect with the city, have a conversation, and know what the city does or how they can actually get assistance, what's in the city's jurisdiction and in their control. So that kind of really grounded us in thinking about what are the systems that will, reimagine that what can be the proactive opportunities for engagement so that people know that there is a government that's supposed to be responsive to them. And I just would reiterate that's very profound to have community conversations where it is not cynicism and I think that the government is failing or I dislike my elected officials. Like, yes, they've been tough times for Portland, but really a desire that these are the issues we have. How do we come into conversation with the city and actually influence decision making? And this is also, I think, a lack of visibility and transparency that we're able to see in the system. The ability to navigate across systems and not having district representation was a very key piece of for folks who kind of interface, were both experienced working directly with community members, but also working with the city or had those kinds of touch points. A sense that there was really no kind of constituent services approach. And of course, at large, with a city of 600,000 plus people among 5 council members, incredibly difficult. But even within that, it's very ad hoc how city commissioners could choose to not engage with communities meant that people's experiences could be wildly inconsistent. And then finally, I'd ground us in the kind of the bread and butter of what we heard a lot about and how we began getting most intensively involved in the city of Portland. Things like the examples of underinvestment in resources, particularly East Portland. A lot of issues related to economic and community development, housing, transportation, and then climate, environmental justice. So there's lack of sidewalks or heat islands. All of these issues, they live in many jurisdictions in a lot of ways, which makes navigating it even more complex. I think for a lot of folks who want to engage in and participate in these civic processes, but certainly the city of Portland, one of the ones that should feel closest to community members, was actually, also one of the most opaque. So I think touching on a few then of my more, I guess, political reflections, I'll just wanted to share some of the functionality, the challenges functionally in policymaking, and then also why we're really hopeful and excited about the new system. I think first point is that it's incredibly challenging with a system where there is a commissioner in charge of a bureau, where they appoint the director. Incredibly hard to move any kind of policy or program that commissioner does not want. And there's, I think, a collegiality, a desire for consensus, historically on Portland City Council. But that's literally meant we've had things that I think are pretty reasonable, not extreme, or I shouldn't say extreme, not earth-shattering policies, but that we've been unable to move for years now just because of a misalignment with who is leading a bureau. So not even arguing that there's something in bad faith happening there, but that it can mean there's a total mismatch and that this can be shaken up at any moment. And that's been incredibly challenging to put that kind of work in, not be able to see it through. So we're excited. We have items for the new city council. So we look forward to the new incoming class. There's plenty to get to work on. We've also seen, frankly, organizations or individuals, people can start becoming, if there is a sense that we're not kind of repeat players, I would say, in the same way that, say, the state legislature is, where you sort of have a sense of interest. There are lobbying entities, people who come back session after session, and we're all in it together. We live together. We've got to work this out. In my experience, we've had programs, funding for specific programs, specific types of community programs, and then for some years now had to come back because they were on the chopping block and very specifically articulated us, our members, about how that was the issue, not programmatic, but that who was offering that, and then in the budget, how that should impact it. So very little ability to have, I think, to really have a process that's public, where we can air that, we can talk about it. So much of that power is centralized in a way that lends itself, frankly, to decision making that's very personal and versus kind of a policy making process. One last piece I would mention is also, it's hard to have somebody who's a squeaky wheel or going to be a champion on a specific issue, or surfacing these problems. Say, like, let's look more into an issue going on at the city and have a deeper kind of political, like a public airing, that elected officials, they have that power to set agendas, to bring issues forward, to and a platform really to elevate them in a way that I think on our city council, it's very difficult to do in a way that I think is really responsive to community. Like, if I went and where folks went, asked about a specific issue and said, how can we push this forward? Can we have this kind of a real and robust conversation and civic process about this? That's extremely difficult to do in a body of this size. So all that to say, a lot of the challenges, but the reason we supported this reform so much is that we believe it will create a stability and a more vibrant civic and political life. But over the long term, we expect with the new system of elections that we will have greater representation over time. People will have to work within their districts and then also across districts in terms of political alignment or policy priorities. So I think that's actually going to be very exciting to see where folks come together, where there's friction, and how we end up using that to make better decisions. And these kind of pendulum swings I was talking about, again, it's not any secret. We've seen very different political majorities on this council over throughout its history, and that those kinds of things that can be very disruptive in a way where I think the stability, we actually can look toward, I think we can hope for more of that and that ongoing collaboration, really a sense that we're in this together. Everyone should have a seat at the table. And what does it look like to bring in community to participate? And I hope that kind of stability is going to be significant. And so we hope also, I'll say certainly shout outs about the ability to continue the form of your presence in the community as a city. So both from the government leadership and our elected officials, but also within the service areas, that their consistency over time will be able to really build sustained relationships in a way that's been very challenging in the past. So yes, we've been very hopeful about this for many years now, and are so excited to see it coming up so soon to embark on this new form of government with a new city council and increase those goals of representation, efficacy, and racial equity. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's exhausting just hearing you. There's so much to be done and so much you have done. So we're going to take a slightly different, more institutional academic approach. Next, we're going to hear from Melody Ellis Valdini, who is a professor of political science at Portland State. And her research focuses on just what we're talking about tonight, the design of political institutions and electoral systems in particular. And Melody put her expertise to work for our city. She served as a member of the districting commission that set the boundaries for our 4 new electoral districts. And she was not a shrinking violet on that group. She had a lot of interesting things to say and was respected by her colleagues and I would say the audience. So Melody's doctorate is from the University of California, Roberts, but she actually went to a different part of it. Her first book was titled The Character of Democracy, How Institutions Shape Politics. And her second, an award winner, is The Inclusion Calculation, Why Men Appropriate Women's Representation. She's also the co-editor of a political science journey concerned with women in political life, but I've forgotten the rest of its title. And Melody, thank you for your leadership and commitment to the city, and we look forward to hearing from you. And please
Thank you
unmute
so
yourself.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and with this excellent panel of people who've done so much for our city. So I know in your previous community education sessions, you've talked a lot already about the nuts and bolts of our new electoral system. So I'm not going to be going through, here's a ballot, here's how to vote today. You've already done so much good work on that. For my time today, I'd like to discuss the consequences of our new electoral system for the behavior of voters, for the behavior of our city representatives. Because I study electoral systems every day, I am obsessed with them, and I think a lot about what they do, and they are incredibly powerful. Here, I'll try to speak up. I'm sorry. I was teaching earlier today, so my voice is a little bit tired, but I will do my best to be as loud as I can. So I'm going to begin by talking about the general consequences of ranked choice voting, and then move into a few examples that political scientists have found that have had really interesting and specific consequences for both voters and elected behavior. So the first consequence that scholars have found that our new electoral system will have is that it's going to reduce negative campaigning and will encourage more collaboration amongst the electeds. Candidates, because of this electoral system, candidates have a bigger incentive to work together than they did in our previous system. Because even if a candidate is not your first choice, they want to be your second choice, your third choice, your fourth choice, and you're not going to pick them if they're attacking your favorite person, right? So the candidates are going to be much more careful and much more kind with each other, both during the campaign as well as when they're in office. Now, this will not be automatic. It might take candidates an election or two to learn this. I saw an attack ad the other day, and I was, oh goodness, no, this is not what we're doing. But in all fairness, I've only seen one. So this isn't an instant switch we can flip. It's going to take time for them to learn this, but over time, the incentive to work together and to collaborate will prevail due to the incentives of this new institution. And you'll see more and more candidates and the elected representatives being, frankly, nice to each other, which I think is going to be a wonderful, wonderful thing in our era of extreme polarization in our country. Another consequence of the ranked choice voting system is going to be for the people of Portland, and this is another change I'm really looking forward to. This system is going to increase our positive feelings about our city and about our government. And you might be thinking, how is that possible that an electoral system could make the people of Portland feel better about our city, right? The new government hasn't even done anything yet. But the fact that there's no spoiler concern in this system, the fact that you can vote sincerely for whichever candidate appeals to you, and you don't have to worry that you're going to waste your vote because your vote will transfer, that has a very strong positive impact on voters' feelings of legitimacy, voters' feelings of being heard, being represented. So in short, voters feel better about the city and the government when they're able to sincerely express what they want and who they want to represent them. That feeling of being represented really makes a big difference in people's assessment of the city. Another consequence that we're likely to see is that voter turnout will be higher, which is a great thing in any democracy, right? We're looking for the highest voter turnout we can get. Interesting thing is political scientists are not quite sure why this is, why we see higher voter turnout in ranked choice of vote systems, but we suspect it's because people want to turn out when they can actually vote for someone who they want to win. So often in single choice systems, people are voting for the least bad option, who they calculated will probably win, but they're not that enthusiastic about. In this system, because you can vote for the person who you actually want to win, we think it will inspire more turnout. I want to be real with you, as I am with my students. There is a negative consequence of our system. One negative consequence that we need to watch out for is something known as ballot exhaustion. The most common example of this is when a voter does not rank the maximum number of candidates, and then let's say they just rank one or two, their candidates are eliminated from the race, and then their ballot essentially turns into an abstention. So in other words, if you don't use up all of your ranks, you only vote for one or two people, both of them are eliminated, you're effectively abstaining from the race. This is not ideal, right? We want all voices heard. So this can be a problem. However, there is a great solution. We've found, as political scientists, we've found that voters will rank more preferences. That is, they will use all 6 preferences that will be given to voters on this ballot if they're provided with voter guides from interest groups and citizen organizations. So in short, I'm really hoping that there will be a lot of voter guides, a lot of citizen groups that are saying, here are 6 people to rank for your vote. We want to see a lot of information shortcuts, particularly really in every district for this race. There will be probably fewer candidates in future elections, but because this is new, we have so many candidates right now. So these information shortcuts can be really valuable for preventing ballot exhaustion. So those are the general consequences, but I also wanted to talk more about the specific consequences we've seen in the countries and the cities that have already adopted ranked choice voting. A lot of people are nervous about our new electoral system, which is completely understandable. It is brand new and it is very different to us. But it's really important to remember that this is not an unusual electoral system. It's new to us, but it's not new in the world. Lots of other cities, entire countries have adopted this method and are very happy with it. Things are working out fine. So I wanted to highlight a few of those and talk about the interesting consequences that we've seen. So the first one I wanted to talk about is Ireland. For about 100 years, Ireland has been using this system to elect their national legislature. Their version of ranked choice vote is called the single transferable vote. And this is very similar, almost exactly the same, in fact, as to what we're going to be using for our city council. It's a multi-seat with 3 to 5 seats in each constituency. Scholars have found that this system creates a very strong incentive for the electeds to give a lot of personal attention to people in their districts. So this is going to be very different. And I know the other panelists said we're talking about this as well. This is going to be very different from the current model that we have in Portland, where it is sometimes impossible. It feels impossible to get the attention of our city government at times. You will be able, when there's a problem in your neighborhood, I know many of us will go to our neighborhood associations right now, but in the future, when there's a problem in your neighborhood, you will be able to call the city councilor who represents your district, and they will want to hear from you. They will feel, frankly, it will feel like night and day, based on what we've seen in other places that have adopted similar systems. Because of that, Irish voters love this system. And when some elites proposed a reform about 10 years ago, there was widespread resistance to it. They kept their electoral system because they really appreciate that constituency connection between the elected and people. Another example of a country that currently uses a ranked choice voting system is Australia. They use it in their national legislature as well, but they use a version called alternative vote. And their version is very similar to what we're going to be using to elect our mayor and our auditor, where the first candidate to reach the 50% threshold wins. This is a very majoritarian character to it. So what that means is winners tend to be political moderates, broad support, very different feeling than what we're going to get from our city council. So the political science, the science predicts that the mayor, our new mayor, will not behave that differently than our current mayor based on the electoral system. Now, as Mr. Jordan will, I'm sure, talk more about, The duties of the mayor are changing dramatically, so that will cause a shift in behavior, but the electoral system is not going to cause a very big shift in the behavior of the mayor. Unlike with the city council, where it will be like night and day with their behavior. Another example of this system being used today is in Maine. Maine uses this for all of their federal elections, including their presidential race. And their version is, again, quite similar to our mayor-auditor system. Voters in Maine are responding to the system exactly as we would expect. At initial adoption point, there is some voter confusion. There are sometimes challenges with ballot exhaustion, but there are also a lot of positive feelings because of this ability to vote sincerely. So there's an overall satisfaction with the system and with the outcomes. The final example that I wanted to highlight is Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Harvard is, right? Full of very smart people who live there. And they adopted this system to elect their city council decades ago. Their system looks like our city council electoral system, multiple seats, but is actually different from ours in some interesting ways. You have to get into the details to see it, but the short version is they do a random transfer of surplus votes. I'm sorry if my internet is giving me a little trouble. So in short, the Cambridge, Massachusetts system is much weirder than ours. So I know that we have the reputation of being the weird one, but actually our system is very concise. Our system is very orderly. So we're not the weird one in this situation. In short, the new systems that Portland will be using are well tested in other cities and other countries. They are a big improvement in terms of representation, and there's really nothing to be afraid of here. We're not going to see any shocking outcomes. I think we're going to see a lot of big improvements in terms of people feeling better about being heard by their city government. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I must say, I'm really pleased the way all of you reinforced each other's remarks and gave us lots to understand and lots to think about. As a reminder for the audience, if you have questions for the speakers, please add them to the Zoom chat, and our president, Carolyn Buppert, will be putting them up where I can see them and relay them to the staff panel here. But before we do that, would any of you like to add anything to your previous comments? Just raise your hand and if you would. Okay, we'll go in with the questions. The first one is for Michael. In the new system, what will the mayor's role and responsibilities be aside from appointing the city administrator?
Good question. Since it's new, the mayor will be the elected executive and per the charter will be in charge of the day-to-day operations of city government. As I said before, they're required to hire a professional manager, and probably the biggest distinction between the mayor and the administrator is that all employees within the city will report to the administrator and not the mayor. The mayor's actually prohibited from being involved in the hiring and firing and managing of the staff, except that the mayor, along with appointing the city administrator and being able to remove the city administrator, appoints the city attorney and the chief of police. And those three seats that the mayor can appoint need to be confirmed by the council. But the mayor has unilateral authority to remove them. So those are the only three city employees that the mayor has hire fire authority over. And obviously the appointment comes with a confirmation from council. But other than that, they are accountable for the day-to-day operation, but hire the administrator to actually kind of run it. The other thing they have the responsibility to do is to propose an annual budget. And so they'll work with the administrator to build that budget. As I said before, I think it will be incumbent on both the mayor and the administrator to work really closely with the council it is possible, and I think it was mentioned earlier, Destiny may have mentioned it about committee structure. I think it's very possible that the council will have a budget committee or at least a finance committee of some kind that will work closely with the executive about finance and budget. And so I think the mayor, it will be really important for the mayor to work really closely with the council president, who gets elected annually by the council, and to be really open with the council about the challenges that the city's facing, because the mayor doesn't sit on council. The mayor can propose legislation just as any of the councilors can, but they don't actually sit on city council. They only vote in case the council ties on something. And this may be an aside that what you didn't ask for, but I'll tell you, I don't know a council president that would let something get to full council that's going to be a 6-6 tie. It would be a huge surprise if the mayor votes on very many, if any, things with council, because it's really incumbent on the council president to make sure legislation is proceeding to a way that there is a majority on council that can support the legislation. So I doubt that the mayor will ever vote. And I'll stop there. I probably could go on a lot longer about the mayor, but
So I have a question for you. One of the things that we hear is that we could think of the mayor as the CEO of the corporation and the city administrator as the chief operating officer. Does that make sense as an analogy? Metaphor?
yeah,
whatever?
I think I'm not an expert in corporate structure, but I think most of us would see it that way. And then would see the council more as a board of directors. However, very different from a corporate board that meets once a quarter and stays at an incredibly high level. I expect council to be really active in the way the city operates and through a committee system. And I'll add this to some of the discussion about transparency. Quite frankly, when legislation gets to our council now, it's pretty much fully baked when it gets to council. When you come and testify in front of our council today, it's not just this council, but traditionally in front of Portland City Council, it's very challenging to get a significant change in legislation once it gets to council. I think through a committee system, the full council will be referring ideas for legislation to them. They'll be doing hearings with maybe even doing roadshows like legislative committees do, where they go around the city and actually hold hearings in districts and look for people's opinion to build the legislation, not just comment on it when it's completely done. So I think you'll see a lot more transparency in how things are built, and I would say a lot more engagement with the public when it comes to legislation.
Thank you. So I've got a question here for Destiny. Destiny, can you say more about how you think it's important for city council committees to not line up exactly with service areas?
Yes. So there was conversations about that. We got community feedback. People were thinking that one of the arguments to keep it service aligned was so that it was clear where to go to if you had concerns about strategic thinking and those manners. But we really wanted to get outside of the siloed effect, rebuild the culture of strategic thinking, long-term planning. Many of the service areas actually overlap in common themes and topics. And so we did provide, as a council, we discussed about this a lot and got community feedback from it. Some general topics to consider being the committee of the whole. One being government performance and finance, another one being public health and public safety, another one being transportation and infrastructure, another one being community development, another one being sustainability and climate, and then housing and homelessness, and the last one being community engagement, equity, and communications. Those were the big topics that we recommended for the future counselors, that we sent to Mike Jordan and his transition team, that we've sent to endorsing candidates or endorsing organizations for candidates and who we've got into. So really, again, thinking less in service specific, more long-term. This is an issue that we have in the service area or in this community. how that shows up and how concerns are brought up is important in public engagement. So we did provide some recommendations on committee feedback, requesting that council committees be hosted after hours in districts, that publics could be, comments could be, in council sessions pre-recorded. Like we really thought creatively with people. And so again, I highly encourage the audience and to read those final recommendations and help us in advocating for your solutions. But that is our thinking of not aligning them with service areas. We want to think more strategically and also broader for the counselors themselves as well.
That's really helpful. I have a question. I don't know who wants to answer it, which is, how do counselors do constituent services when they can't direct city employees to go fix that pothole? Anybody? Michael Jordan, anybody want to comment on that? I'm sure there's lots of answers.
We've had some thinking about how to, well, we've been working on two levels since we got all the bureaus under the mayor. One is general constituent access and relations generally, where someone earlier mentioned any door is the right door. We've really been trying to think about how do we build systemically a much more responsive city government? Because right now you can get lost pretty easily between bureaus. And if you ask a question that two bureaus probably have to be involved in answering, you're done for the most part. So we're trying to think systemically about how is the organization more responsive. But more to your question, we've been thinking about taking a program we have today that's run by a group called PIMO. It's the environmental management organization that really is dealing with livability issues in neighborhoods. And they're holding, I think, 16 meetings every 2 weeks across the whole city. And we've realigned them so there's 4 in each district. And I think it would be a great idea for the executive branch and the caucus from each district to co-host those meetings and engage with constituents regularly about what's going on in their neighborhoods. And the whole point of that process is for the city to be able to, in real time, be responsive to what's going on in neighborhoods. And I think having the caucus in a district co-host those meetings with the executive branch would link the legislators to those 7,000 employees who ultimately have to deliver for the city. I'm sure there are a lot of other ideas on how we can do that. And I'm betting that the representatives from districts will have a lot of ideas about how we can do that. But I want to make sure I say this before we're done. We've been thinking a lot about how to drive the executive and the council together rather than have them go apart. I've witnessed that specifically at Metro in the early 90s, mid 90s. They had elected executive and elected council, and the executive spent most of their time trying to avoid the council, and the council spent all its time trying to control the executive, and they only had one tool, and that was to pass laws. And it became this hugely cumbersome, unproductive relationship. And so we're really intent in preparing to try and figure out how can we set the stage for them to have lots of opportunities to work together. And so we're really intent on that collaboration between the legislative and executive branch.
Thank you. This is a question for Melody, which is, since Oregon has higher voter turnouts than many other places, is it unlikely that our voter turnout will go up more? Or do we think it'll drop with our new ballots?
Well, I
don't
wish
think we can quite hear you, Melody.
Okay, sorry. How about this? Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay. I wish I could predict the future. So it's hard to know because the combination of mail-in ballots with ranked choice voting is unique. But judging from what we know about when people feel represented, when people feel like they can actually make a sincere choice, it really does drive up turnout. So my money is on, yes, turnout will go up, particularly in the off-cycle election. So I think we're going to see a big difference, not this round maybe, but in the next round when usually turnout just drops. I think it's going to hold and be higher than it has before. Yeah, and I'm really interested when in the question that you asked, Mr. Jordan, about how are we going to handle these city councilors, saying let's fix the pothole. I think that's a really important point because again, from the scholarship, we know that once this system is in place, voters will see their city councilor as their point of contact. So they're going to be putting a lot of pressure on councilors. So I'm sure, will be internal mechanisms for informal influence and communication so that the councilors can express what their district is looking for right now, what their constituents are needing. But I think it's one of those, as everyone's talking about, it's going to be one of those big adjustments too, especially, I'm very curious to see if we get our mayor is a former council, the current member of our commission, then that'll be bringing in the old system. So there's a lot of unknowns, but I am certain that things are going to work out and be okay because the system is just so well designed and the Charter Commission just did such a good job on figuring things out. I'm sure we're going to get there, even if it's a little bumpy with us figuring it out at first.
So thank you. But we also probably ought to note that Oregon and Portland's fabled voter turnout doesn't apply to our primaries. I mean, we have selected commissioners with 18% of the electorate, and that's what you get with primaries. So, but we know, I think we would all take the bet that the turnout's going to be higher to elect these people than it has been for some of these positions in the past. Okay, Jenny. How does the Coalition of Communities of Color expect to support community members' engagement with the new city council? Do you foresee, and mayor administrator, do you foresee community access being easier or harder? If you could unmute yourself.
Yes. So our role specifically as a coalition, a lot of the time our work is done through our member organizations who actually do have, including with the city, dedicated programming for civic engagement and leadership development. So there are kind of efforts that are more concentrated like that. For us, we're typically, I would say, we're sort of in a partner role often on specific areas where we are able to bring more to it. So I guess for CCC specifically, less there. But I think that the proactivity in the city in advancing partnerships is like that is going to be what's really critical because we have seen that. I'll say there's some other jurisdictions that do that pretty assertively and proactively and design a lot of their engagement around that. And so I think that's a really I hope that will be part of the vision. There's both the role for the city and the kind of city face things that come across as very branded by the city, but we pretty continuously heard there's an interest and a desire for people to work with trusted organizations, to have folks from government come to, say, a location at a community center and have a conversation, but want that pairing of direct engagement with government at the same time is also feeling like they have supports in a space that they're confident that will be culturally appropriate or culturally responsive to their needs or language access issues. So I think that's kind of the model we've found the greatest success is. We're certainly excited to hear to work with all the other areas and approaches and strategies that the city will be taking on.
Thank you. It's so interesting to think about the idea of meeting with your government in a comfortable space. Even the women of the League of Women Voters confess to being uncomfortable when they're testifying at City Hall. And let's see, this is sort of a lightning round here. For Michael Jordan, will the new government include a deputy city administrator, and will that person be appointed by the mayor?
Well, second question first. The answer is no. The mayor only gets to appoint the city administrator, and the chief and the city attorney. Under the structure that the council adopted last November, we actually have 6 deputies that oversee each of those service areas. And that collection of 7 people with the city administrator and an assistant that works in the executive office make up a new leadership team for the city. And the job of that leadership team, at least as we have envisioned it so far, their primary job is to be horizontal. You remember what I said about vertical and horizontal? That team is really thinking about how do we get the bureaus to be collaborative all the time as a norm and a way of doing business. And it's the first time we've ever had any group of people whose job it was to think horizontally across the whole enterprise. And so that's what's going on right now. New city administrator under a new mayor, 6 months to a year from now, they may have a somewhat different view of how they want to manage the city. We just tried to set it up with a framework that a new city administrator, a new mayor would have a chance to get their footing. I'm sure there will be changes down the road. I'm sure new mayors, new administrators will make changes in the organizational structure to fit the issues of the day, and they should do that.
Thank you. So here's a big one. Looking at the voters' guides for all of you, candidates for mayor speak about how they would solve the big PDX problems, homelessness, crime. But in the new system, mayors don't have power to initiate such efforts. Do panelists see candidates for mayor as failing to recognize this change in authority? And do you agree with that characterization of the mayor's position? Don't
Well,
all speak at once.
I will say I don't agree with it. The mayor has the same ability to initiate legislation and policy as any of the councilors. It does have to go through the council and get adopted, and it has to get funded through the budget, whatever that idea is, and the council has to deliberate on that budget. But you would also have to remember the mayor gets to propose the budget. And I've been doing this a couple of years, and I have yet to see a deliberative body make significant changes in a proposed budget. They've made amendments, they've worked around the edges, but if the mayor, whoever is proposing the budget is working closely with the deliberative body, they can get new ideas into the discussion. And again, the mayor has the same right to propose legislation as any of the councilors.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Melody?
I am definitely not questioning Mr. Jordan. He knows exactly what he's talking about. But I did want to empathize, say I see where you're coming from on this question, because the mayor's role will be dramatically different than what it is now. And it does seem like in the campaigns, the mayoral candidates are not really acknowledging that it will be very different and that their role will, they're going to have very different tasks. And it's, so I can see where this person is coming from, where they're a little bit like, I'm not quite sure that these candidates know exactly what they're getting into. And you may be right. The candidates, have a vague idea of what this role will be, but a lot of it will need to be learned as they take the role and as the system matures. But so I just wanted to say I see where you're coming from there. I think I agree that there is a sort of lack of certainty coming from the mayoral candidates about how this is going to work. But I have the faith that they're going to figure it out. I know that.
Well, I guess we can note that American political rhetoric is full of individuals running for offices announcing that I will do X. I mean, it's not quite King Canute. It's not quite holding back the tide. But we all understand that they individually don't have the power to do any of it. And that leadership and power is going to have to come in this city from persuading the council to share your vision. And of course, there's also a great deal that can be done by effectively leading those 7,500 city employees. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is one close to my heart. Looking at that was looking at the voter's guide. I heard in the discussion of RCV, that would be you, Melody, that for it to work as intended, it's important to use all of your options, all six choices. That makes sense to me for district representation. And as I start looking at the candidates, I see 6 or more who would do a good job representing my district. But looking at the mayoral candidates, I have not found 6 I want to serve in that role. I've also heard you should not list someone you would not want to be the eventual winner. I would feel irresponsible putting 6 names on my mayoral ballot. Would that be wrong thinking?
That's an excellent question, and I'm very impressed with how much thought you're putting into your ballot. That's great. What I tell my students, and some of them have asked me similar things, is think of your vote is giving someone permission to represent you, to represent your views. You are granting them the authority to represent you in Portland government. So if you are looking at a mayoral candidate and thinking, I don't think this person could represent me, I don't think this person should have my permission to speak for me, then do not vote for them. Even if it means you are ranking fewer than 6, that's okay. Remember, your vote will still count, even if you just rank one person. You do run into the danger of that person being eliminated, and then effectively you've abstained. But I think that we just have to remember the fundamental point of this is to feel represented and to get our voices heard in the city government. So you should not vote for someone who you think is not going to represent you well. It's better to just rank a little bit less.
I think that's a pretty inspiring note upon which to wind up this evening. And I'm also relieved because that's the League of Women Voters advice. Don't vote for somebody you wouldn't want representing you. So glad to see we have consensus on this point. I want to thank everybody for this wonderful evening. We want to thank our panelists, Michael Jordan, Destiny Magana-Pablo, Jenny Lee, and Melody Ellis Baldini. We especially want to thank our league president and all-around volunteer, Carolyn, for monitoring the chat, for all of the hard work the panelists did to give us a deeper understanding. And now I'd like to turn things over to our Vice President, Audrey, whose time I cut short.
You're great, Wynn. Don't worry. Thank you to each of you panelists for the excellent remarks. Such a great conversation and such an important topic at this very moment. I want to express appreciation for the 70 or 80 of you in the audience for your thoughtful questions. Thanks again to our moderator, Wynn, and to the Know Your New Government Committee for their help bringing this webinar to life. We know that one panel cannot address every issue related to something so big as the future of our city government, but we hope you've gained valuable insights tonight about Portland's new city government structure. The League has been deeply involved for years in studying the need for a new form of government, and we are committed to ensuring that implementing this change goes as smoothly as possible. This is a big deal, Portland. We worked hard to make this happen, and now it is here, so let's make the most of it. You can join us for the full series of community education events for the 2024 election. Next month on November 20th, we're going to hold an election recap and reflection. You can register and learn more about those panels at our website, lwvpdx.org. And our website also features our 2024 election hub that has all that detailed information you need as a voter, candidate interviews to background on ballot measures. And those voter guides that Dr. Baldini talked about, well, the League has a lot of nonpartisan, impartial information about all those candidates to get you knowing what you need to know about all 6, if you want to rank 6. Now, we don't tell you who to vote for, but we can tell you a lot about all these people who are running so you can make an informed decision based on your values and priorities. Remember that you have until October 15 to register as a voter in Oregon. Ballots are mailed beginning October 16 and must be postmarked by November 5, Election Day. You don't need a stamp to mail your ballot here in Oregon. You can also drop them off at a ballot collection box. Funding for this program is provided by donations to the League of Women Voters of Portland's Education Fund and from the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation. Thanks to Metro East for recording this webinar. And we want you to know that the League of Women Voters is a membership organization. You can join us. We thank our members for their generous volunteer and financial support for our educational programs. We welcome you to join our league. Membership and donor information can be found on our website, lwvpdx.org. Please tell your friends, colleagues, neighbors, people walking down the street to watch the video or listen to the program podcast and learn all the things you just learned that will soon be available on our website. Thanks again to our panelists and to all of you listening. Please have a great evening, everyone, and do not forget to vote. Thank you.